Cedar Point is about to get one of the biggest investments ever in the park's history. Cedar Point's last major fully ground-up coaster was built way back in 2015, and what they have planned for the next coaster will shock you. Cedar Point never fails to disappoint when it comes to adding new coasters, and I think the next coaster the park gets will be the most expensive coaster the park has gotten in over 20 years. Cedar Point's next coaster is going to be epic, and there's a pretty big chance it could even overtake Steel Vengeance as the best coaster at the park. Cedar Point has been building record breakers for decades already, but the last major ground-up coaster the park opened was Valravn, the B&M dive coaster they opened in 2015. Since then, the park RMC'd their old wooden coaster Mean Streak, turning it into Steel Vengeance in 2018, and most recently the park redid Top Thrill Dragster, making the ride experience longer and more reliable for 2024. Cedar Fair did also build Wild Mouse in 2023, but that's not really a major coaster. What's interesting here though is it's been almost a decade with no new ground-up roller coasters at the park, nicknamed the roller coaster capital of the world. There are many factors that cause Cedar Point not to get a major ground-up coaster for this long, but it's safe to say that they'll be getting a major new ground-up coaster very soon. And you won't believe how insane this new coaster will really be. When Cedar Point was planning their most recent major coaster, they did not expect Top Thrill Dragster to end up in a massive accident, causing the ride to need major modifications. In fact, they likely had a totally different coaster planned for the park. When Top Thrill Dragster had its accident though, Cedar Point had to make a major decision. They were able to fix up the coaster, making it an even longer and more reliable ride. But that would cost a lot of money. The cost of redoing Dragster will likely be close to the cost of opening a new standalone coaster. Cedar Point had to choose between fixing Top Thrill Dragster or opening the major new coaster they'd originally intended to open. The park decided to go ahead with the revamp of Top Thrill Dragster, but it would be rebranded as a new coaster, pushing back the park's previous plans for any major new investments. Cedar Point will need to open a major coaster very soon, after having no major, fully new coasters open at the park since Steel Vengeance in 2018. Top Thrill 2 is a great addition, and no doubt will be a very popular attraction, but it's not really a major new coaster, especially not for Cedar Point standards. 2024 is the year Top Thrill 2 opens, so the park won't be getting anything major in 2025. 2026 also likely won't bring any new coasters to Cedar Point, as Kings Island will likely be getting a new coaster that year, and the two Ohio parks rarely get major investments the same year. That's why everything points to Cedar Point getting an insane major new ground-up coaster for 2027, and this new coaster is gonna be epic. There are a few obvious options for Cedar Point's next coaster. Some of these are more likely than others, but none of them are anything special, and none of them will be that major insane record breaker I think Cedar Point is looking for. Still though, these are possible options, so I'll go through them quickly. The most likely of these options is a dueling GCI wooden coaster. This has been predicted for Cedar Point for a long time, and it would be a great addition. A major wooden coaster could do great things for this park, and it's long enough after the park opens Steel Vengeance that it wouldn't seem like two wooden coasters in a row to the GP. A wooden coaster isn't the major record-breaking thrill coaster Cedar Point desperately needs, so I don't think this is the most likely option for the park's next coaster. Another option I can see is a massive B&M surf coaster. Cedar Point has always been a big fan of B&M, and they may very well be interested in opening one of the first and best B&M surf coasters. By 2027, the surf coaster will already be a couple of years old and will likely be very popular, so this is a very possible option for Cedar Point's next coaster. That being said, a surf coaster also isn't the major record breaker I think Cedar Point needs, and that's why I think it's not the most likely option for their next coaster. Another option that's been floated around lately is the idea that Cedar Point will open a B&M Giga Coaster bigger and better than Fury 325 at Carowinds. While anything is possible, I don't see the park wanting to open another Giga Coaster when they already have one, especially since B&M Giga Coasters come with a hefty price tag. It is a possible option, though not a likely one in my opinion. Before I get to the incredible coaster I think is most likely for Cedar Point to open next, I really want to thank you all for taking the time to watch my videos. If you enjoy my content, it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe. It takes just a second on your end, but it really means a lot to me. I've got the best video I've ever made coming out soon on the channel, and it's been over 6 months in the works. So you're definitely not gonna want to miss it. One of the more likely options I can see for Cedar Point's next coaster is a RMC T-Rex. I think the first T-Rex will debut in 2025, so 2027 is already long enough after that for Cedar Point to potentially have a go at one. They could build a massive 300 to 400 foot coaster that is more insane than any coaster we've ever seen. It could be airtime focused, but could also include inversions, thereby differentiating it from the park's Giga Coaster Millennium Force. Cedar Point has to open an insane T-Rex eventually, and 2027 could totally be that time. Also, with the new merger between Cedar Fair and Six Flags, it's likely RMC will now be back on terms with the company and once again considered for new coasters. There's a lot that lines up for Cedar Point to get a T-Rex in 2027, but there's another insane coaster that is a little bit closer to reality that I think is even more likely to be the park's next coaster. Vekoma has been everywhere lately, and their coasters truly look awesome. Vekoma has a couple of tilt coasters opening across the world over the next couple of years, and they really look insane. The tilt coaster is right up Cedar Point's alley, which is why I think we can very likely see them build one as their next coaster. A 250-foot Vekoma tilt coaster would be another insane record-breaking coaster that could do wonders for Cedar Point. I think this option is even more likely than the T-Rex, being that Vekoma already has a few scheduled openings for the tilt model, while RMC has no scheduled T-Rex openings at the time I'm making this video. While I love the idea of a massive Vekoma tilt coaster coming to Cedar Point in 2027, there's just one coaster I think is way more likely to open at the park next. The most likely coaster I think Cedar Point could open next in 2027 is a Mack Extreme Spinner. I don't even have to say anything else. This coaster is just the perfect fit at the park. The company works with Mack rides, their coasters are reliable, and the Extreme Spinner is one of the most beloved and most rare coaster models in the world. If Cedar Point built a massive extreme coaster the right way, it could even become the best coaster at the park and possibly the best coaster in the entire world. If I was a betting man, I'd bet on the Extreme Spinner, but the other options I discussed are all possibilities. Cedar Point's future truly is exciting, and they seem to be headed on the same path as they were prior to the new Six Flags merger. And not every park is. Some parks will gain a ton from the merger, while others will be massive losers. I made an entire video on the winners and losers of the new Six Flags merger, and it's by far one of the best and most difficult videos I've ever produced on the channel. You're gonna love every bit of it, so click here to enjoy.